right. I think we're going to go ahead and get started here, everyone. So hopefully everyone's had a chance to grab lunch or dinner, or depending on what part of the world you're in. But first, I want to take the chance to welcome you to today's webinar on how to manage Windows Server like a boss with Windows Admin Center. My name is Andy Syrewicze, and I'm joined by a good buddy of mine today, Eric Siron. How's it going, Eric?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Good, good. Well, hey, for the viewers out there that follow the Altaro Hyper-V blog, you may recognize Eric's name. So he's been a long-time blogger with us. He's written some absolutely fantastic articles out there. If you're interested in the Hyper-V networking stack, that's one of my particular favorites of his that I like to peruse once in a while. But it's great to have him on for a webinar here, and now you can put a name to the face. So we're really happy to have him here with us today to talk about Windows Admin Center. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to talk about our agenda for the day. So first off, we're going to do some introductions of myself and Eric and the topic and the sponsor of today's webinar, Altaro Software. And then we're going to get into really the question of what is Windows Admin Center. You know, really kind of do some basics there just so everybody has an idea of what Windows Admin Center is, what it can do, what the use case is. And then we're going to talk about how to manage standalone Windows servers, how to manage Hyper-V and failover clusters. And then we're going to get into some S2D stuff, some storage spaces direct, so how to manage storage and storage spaces direct clusters, and finally how to utilize extensions. So one of my personal favorite things about Windows Admin Center is that it is extensible, in that you can install additional software extensions to add more functionality and features into Admin Center. So we're going to be demoing that a little bit later today, and that should be a fun one. And then finally, we'll get into some wrap up and Q&A. So real quick thing about the Q&A. We often don't have enough time to address every single question here live. As you have your questions throughout the webinar, be sure to put them into the questions form. If we can easily address it as we're going through the material at that time, we will. Otherwise, we'll wait until the Q&A section at the end of today's webinar. Now, again, like I said, we have a tough time getting through all the questions we have on these webinars, so we always do a follow-up blog post that contains a full list of all the questions and their associated answers as well. So if you ask a question today that doesn't get an answer, be on the lookout for a follow-up blog post that contains your question and the answer as well. So let's do some introductions. So again, my name is Andy Syrewicze. I'm a technical evangelist with Altaro Software, and I'm also a Microsoft MVP in the Cloud and Data Center Management competency and a VMware vExpert as well. So I've been in the industry for 16 plus years now. Really the only difference is between when I started and now is I have a few less hairs and a little bit more on my gut to carry around. So historically, I've always been focused on the Windows Server stack and VMware and infrastructure specifically, but more recently, I've started focusing on cloud, Azure specifically, and containerization technologies like Docker, Kubernetes, and things like that. I'm quite active on Twitter if you want to reach out to me at @asyrewicze. And I'm also quite active out on all of Altaro's blogs, so altaro.com/Hyper-V, VMware, and MSP Dojo for each of those blogs. And I'll hand it over to Eric to do his introduction. Take it away, my friend.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eric Siron. Like Andy, I'm an MVP, also in the Cloud and Data Center Management category. I am also a certified technical trainer. So in the past, I was a Microsoft certified trainer and delivered in-person curriculum. I have surpassed the 20-year mark and decided that's enough. I'm not going to count anymore, and someday I'll just retire because I'm hedging on that line between experienced and just plain old. I've done a lot of work with small and medium businesses, and you can see some of the verticals, but what I try to focus on is, I know what that's like to be in a small business where you pay the most per seat, but you get the least amount of attention. So I'm in here because I see you and I want to help you. My particular expertise stack, Hyper-V, Windows Server, and I'm okay at PowerShell. That's something I enjoy doing and like helping out on. Down below, you can see my contact information. Feel free to follow me and connect.
Just okay, PowerShell, huh? Just okay.
Well, when you sit in a room with people like Jeff Hicks, yeah, I'm okay.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. I'm in that category too then. All right, thanks, Eric. Real quick word about the sponsor of today's webinar, Altaro Software. So we're a fast-growing developer of pretty fantastic, easy-to-use backup software designed for end users and MSPs. That virtual backup solution is Altaro VM Backup. It's trusted by 40,000 plus customers, 9,000 plus partners, and 1,000 plus MSPs worldwide. If you want a little bit more information on that product, go to altaro.com/VM-backup for more information, or go to altaro.com/MSP if you want information specifically on the MSP program we offer. So with that, I think we're going to get into what you're actually here to hear about today, and that is Windows Admin Center. So the first thing I want to start with was, what is Windows Admin Center? Let's kind of address that particular question. That way we're all generally in the same place as far as the rest of today's content goes. So first off, again, what is Windows Admin Center? Really what it comes down to is it's the next generation management tool for IT pros. So you think about how we've managed servers for the last 19, 20 years, really, since Windows 2000. We've been using MMC, right? And all of its associated snap-ins. And while that tool has been fantastic, it's worked really well for us over the years. It's not really all that different than it was when it first came out. And, management of infrastructure, today and in the future is going more and more the web-based route. So Windows Admin Center is a web-based tool that runs nearly everywhere. You can install it on the server and run it there, connect to it remotely from an endpoint. You can install it directly on a workstation and run it from there. I mean, it runs literally everywhere. In my particular demos, I'm actually running it on my Windows 10 machine. Eric, I think you're actually running it off of a server, correct? For your demos?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So between the two, between the demos, between Eric and I today, you're going to see it running in multiple locations, and you'll find that there's really no difference. It's pretty much the same. I mentioned earlier my favorite thing about Windows Admin Center is its extensibility. So we have a demo, I think it's our last demo of the webinar, where I'm going to install an extension that I've never used myself, and we'll see how it goes. So it'll be fun to see that, and we'll go from there. Additionally, we're going to be, talking about how Windows Admin Center complements existing tools. So I guess one thing I want to point out about that now is that I've mentioned MMC already. The thing that we've heard from Microsoft is that MMC is not going away. And personally, I don't see it going away anytime soon. Maybe 3 to 5 years, that answer might be different. But the way it stands today is that MMC is going to continue to be supported and present, but all of the new development is going to happen in Windows Admin Center. So don't panic. Your legacy tools aren't going away. They're still going to be around and usable. It's just all the new stuff is going to be in Admin Center. A couple other things that you'll see during the demos today is, various pieces of integration with Azure. So you'll see Azure mentioned throughout the UI. That's part of Microsoft's hybrid cloud strategy, in that they're trying to make it as easy as possible to leverage the public cloud where it makes sense for on-premises infrastructure. And if you're interested in downloading Windows Admin Center, I got the download link down there at the bottom right-hand corner. I also have it on this next slide as well, when we're talking about the various versions of Windows Admin Center. So the current stable release is 1809.5, was it, Eric? I think is the current stable release.
1809.5.1.
5.1. Okay, I almost had it.
I'm just being picky.
No worries. But yeah, if you want to download the stable release, it's aka.ms/WAC download. That'll get you to the, like I said, the stable release, and that's the most stable and currently supported build. But there's also an insider preview, and the insider preview gives you newer features, gives you more features, but that also brings a lot of breakage with it too. So all the demos that you're going to see today are using the 1903 insider preview release. So you're probably going to see some bugs. We ran into a bug with one of my demos a little bit earlier. We did another session earlier today. Hopefully, I'm crossing my fingers, it worked just before this session. So hopefully it'll work just fine this afternoon. If you want to download the insider preview, I've got the link down there at the bottom of the screen. It's the same web page where you download the insider preview of Windows Server. It's just you have to scroll all the way down, like you see in the picture here, to additional downloads, and select Windows Admin Center Preview 1903 in the drop-down. So from there, I think we're over to you, Eric. So let me go ahead and make you a presenter. You should have control now, my friend. And you're going to talk to us about managing standalone Windows servers.
That's the plan. Can you all see me?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay. Well, look at me. I'm several slides behind. Here we go. Okay. So normally we would talk about installing. I'm going to skip that. I just want to kind of call one thing out. This particular screen during the installer asks you to pick a certificate. You have to use a certificate. You don't have a choice on that. It will offer to generate a self-signed certificate, or you can go hunt down a thumbprint for a certificate locally installed. That can be a bit of a chore. So what I would say is okay to do is pick the self-signed certificate to start off with. Only use it for initial setup. As I've been kind of talking with Andy, I believe my crusade this year is going to be to get people off of self-signed certificates. They're not secure. They're just not a good thing. They should be used for development and not even test, I would argue. And it'll expire in 60 days, so your clock is ticking. But the bigger deal is that it's a security risk. It's impossible to verify that who owns a self-signed certificate. So when you log into your Windows Admin Center and it hands you that, then you're saying, okay, I'm going to just trust that you are who you say you are. Now I'm going to hand over the credentials to every single Windows server that I have. It's a good idea to know who you're giving those credentials over to. So you can go ahead and pick it this way and then continue. And after that, come back later, right? Once you get your certificate set up. If you don't have a certification authority, if your PKI is not configured, we did write an article on that a little while ago. On my final run through, all I had was a Windows server and a WSL installation, and my last walkthrough on that took me 8 minutes to set up. If you have to start from scratch, I would say you could probably do it in 30 minutes to an hour. So it's really not hard to do, and you don't need a lot to get it done. Once you have a PKI, whether you go with a publicly provided one from a commercial vendor, or if you make your own, you issue it to the system running Windows Admin Center Gateway. If you've installed a self-signed certificate, then you can come back, and I've made this tool that you can see on your screen here. You just pick it, hit OK, and you're done. I did notice that it doesn't work with 1903, so I have an open issue on that. I'm going to get that fixed. I'll get that taken care of for you. But it does work OK on 1809. The second part about Windows Admin Center to be aware of is you want to enable delegation and try to have all your machines in the same domain. If you don't, you're going to get a lot of login prompts, and it's going to get frustrating. I can kind of tell you it's unpleasant. On the official Microsoft documentation, they showed a script to use. I've kind of wrapped that up in one you can see here, the link to it. Makes it a little bit easier to run, but however you do it, you'll be glad that you did. You're still going to get more credential prompts than you want, but it will get better. And each new iteration of Windows Admin Center, it continues to get better. So I think that's going to improve. So let's stop talking and let's start showing. This is the way I've configured my Windows Admin Center. You are looking at 1903, which Andy mentioned is in public preview. There are a few little issues with it, but you know, it's coming along nicely. So let's start with one of the commonly requested features. We're over here to personalization and set dark mode. I know that's a big ask. It's hard on my eyes because the contrast is so low, but you know, if you like it, there it is. I got it.
Priorities, right?
Priorities. Then of course, adding servers to it has gotten better in 1903. Traditionally, we'd come in servers, and hope that goes quickly, and you could just type in a machine. So I'm going to start with one I don't have added. You can see it kind of hunting and thinking about it, and oh, I named it wrong, so it didn't find it, but notice it will let me add it anyway. I think that should go a little bit better. So now it doesn't like my credentials, and notice it's complaining about delegation. I have set up delegation on this one. I think it may be complaining because it's turned off. So I can go ahead and add with credentials, which means I would pick this, or I can just simply hit add and then deal with the problem later. And that's what you would do for, say, a work group join machine. So you can see it here. But the new feature in 1903, servers, drag over here to search Active Directory. You can put in the full name if you want, or you can do a wildcard search. Hit search, and there's all three of my domain controllers. And I can add them all at the same time. Just like that.
Did you want to mention the list bug that you ran into, Eric, with the Excel document?
Oh, yes, let's do that. In the server list, when you go over to import, this and the previous versions was simple text files, all it would take. Now it'll take these multiple types. I tried really hard to get the XL import to work, and it's bad. Don't do it. Unfortunately, I didn't make a demo for this particular webinar, but when you import it, it just reads the XL file verbatim, and so it's all these special characters and things that it can't process. And then just because I wanted to see what happened, I went ahead and let it add them, and it put them all in the list with these really bizarre characters that didn't mean anything, and then I couldn't get them out. I had to wipe out my Windows Admin Center installation to get rid of them. So not quite there yet. Still working on some things. So, but the text file and the CSV, which is basically either one server per line or a comma separated list, those work just fine. They're okay. So let's jump on to my domain controller here. So you'll notice a lot of things in Windows Admin Center can be very slow. This connecting box is going to take a while. So Andy, if you have any good questions that came up while we wait.
I did see a question or two here. Yeah. So I got one person that's got an older version installed without a certificate. It's now been upgraded to the newer version. Can they add the certificate now? Personally, I don't see why not.
Yeah, I would. Again, it comes back to you want to verify the identity of the machine. And if you install in gateway mode, or not gateway, the local Windows desktop mode, it's not a problem there either, because you're not going to connect to it remotely. So you know where you're running it.
Yep.
So, okay. So let me switch over here. We're finally connected. Things will feel slower here, but one thing I noticed, for instance, the event viewer tends to be much faster than connecting remotely through MMC. It's noticeably faster. I don't know if anyone else has the same experiences that I do, but it tends to take that a while to come up. You have the export, you can clear your log, and you can filter it, although the filter is not as good as it is in the MMC. So if you're into XML path queries, you're going to have to do MMC still for that, at least for now. But it works well enough for most people, I would say. I wanted to highlight the roles and features options here. So compare this to the server manager view of the same thing. I don't believe this is quite as clear. It's not as obvious where the lines are. So we are looking at one segment for roles, which now that I highlighted is pretty obvious. But without that, it just looks like there's a list in your face. You can collapse it. And then the second thing to compare it to, like you were accustomed to, oh, I see a checkbox. That means it's installed, or an empty box, which means it isn't. Well, not here. This means I check it because I want to then come up here and install it or remove it, as the case may be. So do keep that in mind, things of that nature. And for the last part of this, this is a 2016 machine I'm connected to. I don't know if we brought that up yet, but you can manage any server version back to 2008 R2, but each older version, you progressively lose features until you get just the minimal sort of support. So I want to go to a 2019 system, show you a new feature that I'm excited to have. Way down here.
While that loads, one other thing worth mentioning is the storage migration service. I always like to bring that up in these conversations. That feature actually supports 2003 because they want people getting off of 2003. So
right.
It's not supported for anything else, but for the storage migration feature in WAC, 2003
yes.
supported.
And I have not yet put this to use because I don't have anything that old. So you can say I get the great big install button. It's like, hey, I would love to try this out, but I haven't touched it yet.
Yep.
What I want to show off is system insights. You do have to have a 2019 server. Unfortunately, it doesn't work with your older ones, but this gives you forecasting. So I know a lot of you guys out there in the small businesses especially, you always have salespeople coming in like, well, you got to get on 10 gigabyte. You got to do it right now. You can pop in here and show them this and say, well, why? What am I doing here that shows you that I need 10 gigabit, excuse me. So not that I'm opposed to 10 gigabit, but it's tell me right here, my network use is forecasted to remain within the available capacity. I don't need to do anything. So this is a really slick feature. And you get it for CPU, networking, storage, which doesn't quite work because this is a cluster member, and then your volume usage, so your local. Kind of get these charts. Now this one is still building because I keep tearing my Windows Admin Center down and rebuilding it, so I don't have a good amount of historical data yet, but it will help you as you get some history on it.
Hey Eric, real quick, we got one question here. I've got a user trying to look at System Insight on their system right now, and they don't see it. It's only for 2019 servers.
It's only for 2019 servers. That's correct. Only.
Yep. Yep.
And I believe, I don't know, is it in 1809? My 1809 is not up. It came along later. It was not one of the original.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
And you have to install it and so. That part I'll wait for you when you get to your showing people how to install things. So there's a couple things to get through before you get there. Somebody said it is an 1809.
Yep, I see that.
So you just have to have a 2019 system and it will work for you.
Yep.
Okay, so we're gonna shift gears just a tiny bit. We want to talk about Hyper-V and the failover clusters. First thing on the Hyper-V box, it does depend on the PowerShell module to be installed locally on the Hyper-V machine, not on Windows Admin Center machine, but on your Hyper-V box. If you haven't done that, you can use Windows Admin Center to do it, because the only thing it cares about is I can't control Hyper-V until I have the module, but everything else, including rules and features, works just fine. I didn't have a lot to talk about there. We're just going to start doing it. So let's do it from the cluster. Since we're talking about clusters now, I don't know if we talked, but you can sort your list so you only see clusters if you like. So I want to pare it down to that and then click on it. Wait for it to populate. I get some minor details on my cluster. Andy mentioned in one of our private conversations, you can look at your old validation reports. That's kind of nice, just to be able to pop that in and not go digging through the log files for it. And I want to look at virtual machines. So here, it's going to, when it pops up, it's going to show us only the items that are clustered. So I've got some, like for instance, my domain controllers they are on cluster nodes, but they are not clustered. They are on an internal storage only, so they will not appear. You get your status, your sort of a heads up display, and something I really enjoy, the CPU and memory both. It's dividing up. This is what the host is using. This is what the guest is using at a glance. There's no digging around or let me parse through my metrics logs here. It's just, there it is right there. Then switch over to the inventory and it shows my virtual machines. Again, you only see my clustered, so it's a little bit shorter. And if you want, you can create a new one. And this is where I get a little bit upset, is if you look here, the path, this is where it's going to put it, no problem, because I have a cluster shared volume available. I tend to do everything on SMB3 storage, so I literally had to create a CSV just for this demo. Otherwise, I can't create a virtual machine because everything I use is SMB3. So that I'm not a big fan of, but look right here. You can create a brand new virtual machine with nested virtualization enabled. Right there in the GUI. So this is where we can see that Windows Admin Center is going to evolve away from the MMC, kind of draws a line. This is what we did. WAC is this is what we're doing. So these kind of future things are coming.
Did you want to point out the
I did.
Yep. Bug that we ran into yesterday? I think it's worth mentioning that. That way people at least know.
It is, yeah. So Andy caught this. I didn't. This was a great one. So when you come in, you click Add Desk, and then you're shown this is how I want to install it. So if you say I want to install from ISO, and if you give it an ISO that has the ISO extension capitalized, it will throw it out as that's not an ISO. I'm just gonna off the cuff here assume that's a JavaScript thing and just something, a little minor bug, but we're in preview and we're going to be forgiving. But if that happens to you, just rename the file so the ISO extension is lowercase.
Yeah, that was an interesting one to figure out. It's like, right. Wait, not a valid ISO, but it is.
I got it right for Microsoft. How can it not be valid? You can do a migration. So let's pick one here. This is my guy to move. Go more and move, and it's going to pick. It's going to decide: do I want to do a live migration or do I want to do a quick migration? You know, Failover Cluster Manager doesn't give you that option. You have to tell it which one you want. Here, it will decide on its own. You can tell me if you think that's good or bad. I'm personally okay with it. And then up here on the right, you can say, hey, I sent the message. And we're going to see how this demo goes. I know sometimes this will simply hang at a percentage and say, oh, I'm working on it. And 3 hours later, you come back and I'm working on it. But if you pull in the console, you say, well, it's been done for 20 minutes. It kind of looks like this one may not go through, or it might. But this is usually just display issues.
We can give that a minute or two here, Eric, and we got a question here that I think is kind of relevant in this discussion about managing VMs. Got a question here about, will this be replacing VMM, Virtual Machine Manager? And
it will not. That
exactly.
is a. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, bud.
No, you're fine. Go for it.
So no, it's not going to replace VMM. When this question has been asked to the several, I'm not sure exactly how I've seen it filter a few times, and what comes down to is what you see on the screen is basically how they want Windows Admin Center to look. Whereas if you open up VMM, you get a completely different view. You can see the status of multiple virtual machines across multiple clusters all at the same time. You can select a bunch of them and say, hey, upgrade the VMM components. Those things are not going to happen here. It is designed around the idea of one machine at a time.
Yep, correct. So yeah, I expect VMM is going to be around for quite a while yet.
Yes. So yeah, that still says it's moving, and I'm going to bet it's probably lying. I think it's already moved. So let's talk also the SMB3 thing I mentioned before. Let's go in here and look. I believe this is going to error as soon as I open it, or shortly thereafter, assuming it opens. We have another question while we wait. We can take.
Definitely. I've got another one here where kind of a use case question. So you install WAC on one server, and you can then connect to other servers and desktops from Windows 10, 1709 upwards without any agent or client software on the other machines. That is correct. You can absolutely do that. Under the hood, this is all using PowerShell.
Well, it uses also the larger than just PowerShell, uses the Windows Management Framework, so you do have to upgrade that to version 5.1. I think somebody else was talking about that earlier.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. Good differentiation.
So here, yeah, it's probably not going to load that because that sits on SMB3 storage. It didn't error this time, which in the past I was getting errors. It's like I don't even know what to do with this. So I suspect the issues with SMB3 come down to this is, again, the passing credentials around from computer to computer to computer, and after a while it's like, this is a security risk, I don't want to do that. So I imagine they're still working through some of those concerns. Okay, and one more thing I really want you to see here. I need to switch to an individual node because the virtual machine I want to show you only runs here. So you're going to see a different list, even though it's a node in the same cluster that I just showed you. We're going to get a different inventory. So this one right here, this is my Linux machine that I use to monitor all my other machines. So I come under here to more, and I get two options. I get connect and download RDP file. Now the nice thing about both of these is these are a VM Connect session that run independently. You're not RDPing directly to the machine. So I've already downloaded that one, so I can edit it and fix it. I'm logging in to the Hyper-V host right now. That's what it's asking me for. And here, there's my Linux machine running in an RDP session that I don't think I've made this clear enough in the past, so let's really reiterate. I don't have to open anything at all on that machine for this to work. I'm not connected in on SSH. I have nothing at all connected. I'm talking only to the Hyper-V host. And the cool thing about that is it is completely 100% out of band. So you're watching me. I'm going to reboot this machine. I'm not going to lose connection to it or anything. Everything's just fine. And
RDP to a Linux machine.
To a Linux machine, sort of. I'm not RDP to it. I'm RDP to the host, and then VM bus connects to it.
Yep.
So you can do this to set up a machine, whatever. And of course, now I'm showing off Linux because I think that's the part people are like, really, that works? And this also works on your Hyper-V virtual, or sorry, your Windows-based virtual machines as well. It doesn't have to be Linux. It can be anybody. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to you, Andy.
Sounds good. Let me go ahead and grab presenter here. All right. Should be able to see my screen again. Can you see that, Eric?
I can see you. I can see you Moving.
Okay, so you do see the screen, good.
Yes.
All right. And I gotta switch presenter view here. Okay, so thus far we've talked about failover clusters, Hyper-V, and standalone servers. So now I want to take a step back and kind of talk about the third use case for Windows Admin Center here, and that is centered around Storage Spaces Direct. And if you've used Storage Spaces Direct, or you've talked about it, or if you've read about it, sorry, if you've read about it in the past, you'll know that the management story around S2D or Storage Spaces Direct has always kind of been a little bit up in the air. Historically, you've always had to manage it pretty much strictly through PowerShell, which a lot of administrators, they don't like to do that. They at least want some sort of GUI to use in your day-to-day administration. And now with Windows Admin Center, we have that. So Windows Admin Center has this hyper-converged cluster manager section that's designed specifically to manage S2D clusters. And it comes with a couple of caveats here. I'm going to show it to you in just a second, but I want to talk about a few points here first. So the installation of S2D is still done with PowerShell. You still have to set up your nodes, you still have to configure your cluster like you historically would, and then you have to go in and use the PowerShell commands to enable S2D and all of that good stuff. Not all management functions are in the UI yet, so there's still some things that you have to go to PowerShell for. So like, for example, if some sort of storage repair job is running, you still have to go and issue a get storage job on one of the nodes to see, hey, is there a storage repair happening or something like that. There is some bugginess during setup of the management pieces inside of Windows Admin Center for this, mainly due to the fact that my S2D cluster here that I'm using for the demo today is actually a 2016 S2D cluster, and Windows Admin Center came out after 2016 did. And basically the nice thing about it is, even though it was a bug, it told me exactly what I needed to do to get it working. So it'll say, hey, because WAC came out after 2016, you need to go install this particular KB, make sure it's there and installed on your nodes, and then you need to go issue this string on any node in the cluster. It really did a good job of letting me know exactly what I needed to do to get it working. So with all that said, with those caveats said, there are a load of useful features here. And really, it's, in my opinion, it takes S2D from being, your enthusiast hyper-converged infrastructure solution to more of a mainstream, in my opinion. A little bit more ready for prime time. So let's actually take a look at it. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my instance of Windows Admin Center. Now, like you saw with Eric's session, or with his demos earlier, he was running it off of he was running Windows Admin Center off of a Windows server. He was connecting remotely to it. I've actually got Windows Admin Center running on my local Windows 10 machine. So when you run it locally on Windows 10, you'll actually get the system tray icon down here to let you know that, hey, Windows Admin Center is working. And you can see that I'm just attached to local host on port 6516. So here I've come down into the hyper-converged cluster manager section. Here's my S2D cluster, type hyper-converged cluster. And again, for those that aren't aware, HCI, or hyper-converged infrastructure, is just the concept of there being compute and storage contained within the same chassis. So in my particular case here, I have a 2-node S2D cluster. Each node in the cluster has Hyper-V installed on them and Storage Spaces Direct installed on them. The storage is striped across the 2 nodes. That way I can tolerate one host failure and still have everything up and running. So that's the whole gist of HCI. So on this particular dashboard, you'll notice a couple of different things compared to like the failover clustering dashboard that Eric showed you earlier. And that is, you've got a couple of different pieces of information. So yeah, we've got the typical CPU memory usage. But we also have these storage metrics too. I've got all of my drives healthy. I've got 10 total drives across these 2 nodes. I've got 1 volume set up, 2 VMs, 1 running, 1 powered off. And because we're talking about, hyper-converged infrastructure, storage is really, really important. You can see down here, you've got some cluster performance metrics, specifically probably your most important ones for a cluster like this, and that is IOPS and latency. Now this particular cluster for this demo is completely virtualized. It's not really doing a whole lot, so obviously there's not a whole lot going on right now. And now I want to just kind of step through a couple of different sections here, so you kind of get a feel for how things are different and what to specifically look for in an HCI management instance here in WAC. So if I come in here to the summer review, and I think Eric pointed this out a little bit earlier, we have a very similar view here based on like what he showed earlier. I really like, and I'm going to reiterate this a little bit, is the fact that I can see how much CPU and memory the host is consuming, compared with how much CPU and memory the guest VMs are consuming. Huge time saver for me. I really like seeing that. The other nice thing here is I've got all the various events that have to do with the cluster here as well. So you can see 13 hours ago, the VMM service completed a live migration. Also 13 hours ago, I had an issue with the memory balancer. So you can actually kind of step through and see all the various events that have to do with this cluster. Now, kind of like what Eric showed you earlier, I have an inventory of virtual machines as well. For this particular demo, I'm going to drill down into this virtual machine. Eric showed you the RDP option. I'm just going to show you the option for actually connecting to the virtual machine inside of a browser. Now, let's all cross our fingers, because this is the one that didn't work for me this morning. When I clicked connect this, okay, it's going to work this time. So when I clicked connect this morning, it just did nothing. No error messages. It just did nothing, which is actually more maddening, but it's actually going to work this time. So let me authenticate. And you can see it's a very basic console. So this virtual machine is actually running Windows Server Core 2016, I believe. So I can run sconfig, and I can manage and utilize this virtual machine just like I would any other virtual machine. You do have some other basic functions here. I can issue a send, control, alt, delete. I can copy from a remote clipboard, so I can cut and paste things in and out of the virtual machine. But it's a very basic, simple way to get out of virtual machine without having to do a whole lot else other than use just Windows Admin Center.
I can interject a little bit there. You notice up there it said basic session.
Yeah.
So I don't have enhanced session enabled anywhere. So I wonder if we had enabled session, if we would have had a completely different experience.
That's a good point. That's a good point. It's very rare I used enhanced session mode myself, because once the VM's up, I'm usually just RDPing into it. But that's a good point. I'll have to try that out. A couple of other sections here. You can control and create virtual switches here. So you see I've got 2 virtual switches, basically the same thing on both nodes. Very easy to set up and install new switches, external, and it'll load a list of your various network adapters on the host that you have selected. I mean, very much what you're used to using inside of Hyper-V Manager. The reason there's no eligible adapters right now is because all the NICs on that particular host are currently used, so there's none to show. One thing that I always like to point out with this, and it's worth showing, when you're using the legacy tools like Cluster Manager, it refers to a physical or any server that's part of the cluster as a node. Windows Admin Center does not. I found that very interesting. It refers to them as servers. So that's just one important thing to keep in mind as you're using the tool here. And kind of the same thing as Cluster Manager, I can go to inventory, I can get a list, what's the make and model. Again, these are virtual machines, serial numbers, that type of thing. And then let's get to the storage section here. So again, this is a hyper-converged cluster deployment. So we've got storage involved here as well. So I've got 1 volume, and again, it's currently a 2-way mirror. So this is a 2-node cluster. I don't have any other options with Storage Spaces Direct. I have to use a mirror with a 2-node cluster. With more nodes, you have a little bit more flexibility for what kind of resiliency you want to set up for the cluster storage. The other thing worth noting here is that it automatically will do a CSV file system. So no SMB3 in this particular case. If you want to look at the specific drives that are associated with that volume, you can come down to drives and look at your inventory. This is where you could actually come in here and say, oh, maybe I have a failed drive, turn the light on or off if your hardware supports that. Again, virtualized in this case, so obviously we can't do that. But this is a good place to check out the health of your various disks. And then a couple other things I wanna show you. If you go to updates here, cluster aware updating is actually baked into Windows Admin Center. So if I authenticate here really quick, there's not going to be much to show because I don't have it set up to do this, but it should give me just a button and a short description here on, basically, hey, do you want us to enable cluster aware updating on this cluster? And what that allows the cluster to do, what it allows Windows Admin Center to do here is manage Windows updates, but do it in a way that only takes one cluster node down at a time to make sure that the VMs running on this cluster stay online and available at all times. So really a nice, easy time saver. It saves a lot of headaches as far as, update management goes. And then finally, the diagnostics section here. So diagnostics, it's an extension that you have to install. I don't have it installed in this particular instance, but you'll be able to see here that you can collect some performance metrics, some troubleshooting metrics. And the other thing I like to point out here is that when you call Microsoft for support for an S2D cluster, chances are they're going to ask you to go and run this and pull the information and send it to them. It really reminds me of doing a support case with VMware, and that, hey, send me your VM logs, or I forget the actual name of the log. But they did the similar thing. You go into the vSphere client, you'd say produce logs. That's what it reminds me of, and it seems very similar in this case. So speaking of extensions, that's what I actually have up next to talk about. Let me swap that back around really quick. And utilizing extensions. Again, my particular favorite thing when it comes to Windows Admin Center is the extensibility. They're really easy to install. I'm going to show you here in a second how to install them. And it's not just for Microsoft tools either. I know the picture on the left-hand side of the slide is really small, but if you look close, you'll see that there's a number of third-party vendors like Fujitsu, Lenovo, Squared Up, Data On. They all have third-party extensions that you can just go and select it and click install, and it installs it into Windows Admin Center. The nice thing about this is that many vendors are starting to create add-ons for this. That way, their management, their management infrastructure is rolled into Windows Admin Center. That way, the IT administrator really has, that single pane of glass that all of us are striving for, right? And the other thing from a security perspective is if you're in an industry with high security like defense or banking or healthcare or something like that, you do have the ability to add your own extension repository. So if you want to control what extensions can get installed into Windows Admin Center, it's possible to do that. So let's head back to our demo really quick. And I'm going to go up here into the settings section and go to extensions. Now, I asked Eric the other day if this was a crazy idea. But basically what we're going to do is I'm going to install an extension that I've never used myself. But the point of this demo is to just show you how easy it is to find an extension that you want to use, install it, and then start using it. So for our session earlier this morning, we actually installed the Active Directory preview extension, which it actually worked out. But which one did we want to do this time, Eric? I think we talked about doing DNS, didn't we?
Yes, DNS, please.
DNS, you want to see DNS. All right.
I want to see DNS.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and install this DNS preview extension to allow us to manage DNS at some level. Now, admittedly, I don't know what level it's going to allow us to manage DNS, but we're going to find out. But you can see it's actually installing the extension, and after it's done installing the extension, it refreshes Admin Center for me. So now we can see, oh, it's not in a list anymore. And if I go over to installed extensions, I can see that the preview extension is there. Now, the other nice thing that I like about Admin Center that I forgot to mention on the slide I showed you a second ago was it's fairly good about letting you know when an extension has an update available. And it will usually poke you to say, hey, there's an update available for one of your extensions. Click here to check it out. So it does a fairly good job about that. So I'm going to assume that I need to connect to one of my DNS servers directly in order to use this. So we'll go to one of my domain controllers here. and my guess is down at the bottom in the left-hand column, there's going to be a DNS section added. So we'll give that a second to connect here. Howdy, have you seen any good questions come through, Eric, that you want to address really quick?
I am kind of tackling them out of band. There are a couple MSP related questions you may want to jump on.
Yeah, okay.
See if I can grab one out here. Can you use WAC to manage Exchange Online protection?
Exchange
I don't know
Online.
the answer to that one.
I don't know for sure either. I don't believe you can, but don't quote me on that.
All right, the Azure connections continue rolling in. We keep getting new things that connect us to Azure, and we can almost make another webinar out of that. There's so many.
Just about. Yeah, I've not seen anything about Exchange Online protection. It could be at some point they'll add that. You know, again with this whole extensibility idea. But today I don't think it's possible. Not with anything that I've seen so far. With that, let's take a look at this. So the extension is available, and it's down here in the extension section on the left-hand pane. So the DNS PowerShell tools are not installed. So it's giving me the option to install them. So I guess we'll see here. So it's actually executing. I'm sure in the background it's just doing a PowerShell install module in the background. I did see a question earlier that I want to mention really quick is, can you see what PowerShell commands are happening with these associated, GUI functions that we're doing? You got this PowerShell button up here in the right-hand column. I don't know if it'll show anything. Okay, so it will. So here you can actually see what PowerShell scripts are relevant for the particular section of the UI you're in. So I want to make sure I address that first chance I got. So you'll see that button available in most sections of the UI here. So we're still installing the RSAT tools here. Oh, there we go. Okay, it's working. Getting excited. I like it when things work. Maybe. So we got our forward lookup zones and reverse lookup zones. And again, I've never used this particular extension before. Okay, so we can see my local domain here. And hey, look at that. I got a list of records too. So this is handy. This is fairly new, and we haven't been able to do this before. So I know this and AD were specifically very popular asks for Windows Admin Center. So it's good to see that they're starting to go through and address some of those requests. So very cool. So again, that demo was to just show you how easy it was to install an extension and extend the functionality of Windows Admin Center. Very simple, very easy to use. So let's head back to our slide deck and we'll wrap things up. So with that, I want to share just a couple of slides with you about some different pieces of information here. This also gives you kind of a little time to go ahead and get your final questions added into the question form. Again, if we can't get to it today, we'll be sure to get your question answered in a follow-up blog post as well. So one thing I want to mention here, we've got a new ebook out there that Eric himself wrote for us. So this is a fantastic new ebook on this very same topic, but it does a really good job of digging a little bit deeper into some of the stuff that we didn't talk about on this particular webinar. Eric, did you want to talk about the ebook for a second?
Mostly just think of it as kind of the opposite of the webinar. I spent more time on the installation, especially in getting your environment prepared to run it successfully, and brought more into the security concerns that I kind of glossed over when we were breezing through.
Good deal, good deal. Yeah, it's got a lot of great content. I think it came out to 70, 80 pages. As a special thank you for you viewers that are joining us today, we're going to be emailing you a link to directly download the ebook, no additional sign up needed. So keep an eye on your email. You'll be getting a link where you can go and grab this ebook. Again, no additional sign up needed for that. So keep an eye out for that. I also want to mention that we have a new forum community that we're building here at Altaro. So we call them our dojo forums, and you can view them by going to dojoforums.altaro.com. And currently today, our Hyper-V Dojo forum is there and working. And really it's kind of grown outside of just Hyper-V. We are also talking about Azure and cloud stuff. We're talking about container stuff. I think we even have a couple of Office 365 questions that have been asked there as well. So if you want to be part of a new great community, come join us. Eric and I are very active there. And maybe you think of a question about today's webinar that you forgot to ask while you were on the line today. Come ask us there, and then we'll get you an answer. Also, if you're interested in some more video content from us, me and Thomas Maurer are going to be doing a Facebook live stream event here in the coming weeks. Thomas is a former Microsoft MVP who actually now works for Microsoft as part of the Azure advocacy team. So Thomas has a lot of great information to share, really a nice insider perspective on all things cloud and Azure. And it's kind of going to be, like I said, a live on the air type of format. If you want to get notified for when that's going to be streaming and available, you can go to altaro.com/hyperv/signup, or you can just follow the Altaro Facebook page as well at facebook.com/Altaro software to be notified when that is ready to go. And again, take this time to go ahead and get your last couple of questions in here. Eric's kind of going through the list and answering the ones he can. I'm going to talk about Altaro VM Backup here really quick. So that's our core product here that I mentioned a little bit earlier. We focus on 4 things really here at Altaro. The backup has to be super easy to use and efficient to set up. But while being easy to use, it also has to be powerful, flexible, and easy to scale. We also focus a lot on praise-winning support. I have nothing but fantastic things to say about our support team. We don't do tiered support at Altaro. We focus on answering the phone quickly within 30 seconds. And the person that answers the phone is the person that owns your issue start to finish. A couple of our latest developments, we can back up directly to Azure storage accounts. We do offer continuous data protection backups with RTOs as low as 5 minutes. We have WAN optimized replication and DR baked into the product now. That's a recent add. We also have support for Windows Server 2019. If you're an MSP, we do have an MSP program that gets you access to all the bells and whistles of the product. So you don't have to worry about what version of the product you're buying. You get all of it in a pay per VM per month format. No contracts. You can quit at any time. The only requirement is a 10 VM per month minimum. And one thing I want to point out here really quick is Altaro Office 365 backup. We can now protect Office 365 mailboxes, contacts, and calendars with more stuff coming in the future. If you want a little bit more information about that, go to altaro.com/office-365. And more generally, again, on MSPs, altaro.com/MSP for more info. With that, we've got a couple of minutes to address questions here. So again, get your questions into the GoToWebinar questions form here. What I want to do really quick is do 2 quick polls really quick. So the first one is, what do you see yourself using Windows Admin Center for? And so we'll put that poll up here, and we will take a look at the results here in just a second. And while that poll is running, we'll go ahead and tackle a few questions. So, any questions that stand out to you, Eric, that you want to address verbally? Uh-oh, did I lose you, Eric? Must be on mute.
Oh, there I am. I'm here.
Ah, there you are.
No, I did see one question straight up your alley, and I keep losing it as I scroll the list.
Was it the one about managing multiple instances of Admin Center as an MSP?
Yes, that one.
Yeah, I did see that one earlier. So that's a question I get quite frequently is, as an MSP, how do you manage and use Windows Admin Center? So real quick, before Altaro, I spent 10 years in the MSP space, so very familiar with kind of the unique struggles that MSPs face. And that's, like I said, that's a question I get quite often. And I have guys that talk about, hey, I could manage this over the public internet, and I really cringe when I hear that, because it just goes against every security molecule in my body to send management traffic over the public internet. I would say if you're an MSP wanting to utilize Windows Admin Center, to manage multiple customers. I would target your largest, highest touch customers, and I would establish either a perpetual VPN connection between you and them, or on an as-needed basis when you need to conduct management operations with them. So that's the direction I always like to send MSPs with that question. So I think we've got the poll results here. So it looks like 98% of you are going to use it for server management, with 26 and 29% of you using it for cluster and hyperconverged management, and 23% for Azure hybrid cloud features. Okay, so that's pretty much what I anticipated. So with the manage one server at a time mentality that Windows Admin Center has, I don't think there's any surprises there, are there, Eric?
Not really, no.
Yeah. So I've got another poll I want to run here that's more specific to Storage Spaces Direct, basically whether you're going to use it or not. So I'll go ahead and give you a few minutes to fill out that poll. I'm kind of interested to see where this one ends up. And we'll go ahead and we will touch base on a couple other questions here. Let's see. I do have a recent question here that was just submitted, Eric, about WAC with 2012. So I have a 2012 DCE VM running Exchange 2013 that Microsoft says no on PowerShell 5.0. Thoughts or insights?
This has been a sticking point for me for a long time that yes, that's probably where you are. You're probably stuck, unfortunately. It's upgrading PowerShell on Exchange. Maybe it's changed in the last couple of versions, but I know specifically for 2013, that was a bad plan. You could really back yourself into a corner. So
yeah,
I'm sad to say you're probably stuck on that one.
There was just something about the Exchange PowerShell commandlets that were just ugly too. I mean, most PowerShell commands you run for most things, I mean, it's just a simple one-liner, but I mean, to do something simple in Exchange, it's like 3 lines long, So I don't know if that's just the nature of Exchange or what, but yeah, I wish we had a better answer on that.
And I believe they stated publicly that that is their API, is the PowerShell. I'm like, yeah, okay.
Right. Looks like our second poll is closed here, and the question is, how likely are you to use Storage Spaces Direct? And 55% maybe a little, which, in my conversations, I've started to see that percentage kind of creep up a little bit here over the last couple of months, especially now that we have a UI for managing S2D. So, all right, good insight. Thanks for responding, everyone. I think we got time for just a couple more questions here, and there's one here that we got this morning as well about Firefox. Did you want to address that one, Eric, about the whole browser support thing?
If you want me to, I suppose. But as I mentioned this morning, there's I think every single one of us, one browser or another, has just irritated us to the point where we're just kind of like, I'm done with you, and I'm not going to come back for years and years, if ever. And for me, that browser happens to be Firefox. Anyway, the Windows Admin Center team has said that their goal is to make Windows Admin Center HTML5 compliant. If your browser is HTML5 compliant, it's supposed to work. Firefox specifically, I don't know, but it's supposed to work, basically. But we also know that as we flip between Edge and Chrome, you get a different experience, like something works better in one than it does the other, and so on. So I can't definitively say yes or no on Firefox, but it's supposed to work.
I suspect that as the new Edge browser starts to make its way out to stable release, I would suspect that a lot of those issues will start to be resolved. That's just my gut feeling. I could be completely wrong, but maybe I'm being optimistic there. Let's see. I think we've got time for one more. Let's take a look here. We addressed the VMM question. One question I think we talked about earlier as well, Eric. Can you manage Linux machines with Windows Admin Center?
So far, the official answer is we love the Linux community, and you guys can get out and develop an extension, and we'll be happy to see it. So coming from Microsoft specifically, at least for now, and as far as the cards I can view ahead, the answer is no, they're not going to do it. So I don't think they're opposed to it per se, just they have so many other things they want to get working, that's not top of mind. So, but the SDK is public. You can go out and encourage somebody, maybe you go search GitHub for Linux and Windows Admin Center. Somebody may already be halfway through it for all I know. So
yeah, could be. That's true. That's true. Well, I think that puts us to the top of the hour, and I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. So I'm going to go ahead and take the time to say thank you for attending. Again, if you asked a question that didn't get answered, again, we'll be putting a blog post together that contains a full list of the questions and their answers. So be on the lookout for that. And Eric, I want to thank you for taking the time to come talk to us today about Admin Center. It's been great to have you on the call here.
Always great working with you. Appreciate it. You having me on. And thanks to everybody for coming. Really enjoy this community. Great people.
It is great. It's always great fun, and we're really happy to come share the knowledge with you and hopefully make your life in the trenches a little bit easier as an IT pro. So with that, I'm going to let you go. And again, thanks for attending. Thanks for coming to see us here at Altaro, and we hope to see you for another webinar in the future. Have a good day.